my name is Alyssa. We're doing our group presentation on Japan and how business is conducted there. So, a quick introduction, communication in Japan is often skewed. We'll get into that a little bit later in the presentation, but for just a quick little introduction onto that, I guess, the communication can change drastically depending on who you're talking to and who comes into that conversation. So for example, you could be talking to a friend and it could be a very casual conversation, and then someone that's older or maybe of a higher status than you in terms of business or whatever comes into that conversation is drastically going to change. It's going to change immediately from a more casual conversation to something more formal. It is the most technologically advanced country. We'll get into that a little bit as we talk about some of the growth and opportunities that come with Japan. It is favorable for business opportunities. Part of that is because of the technology and how fast technology seems to boom in Japan. But again, we'll get into that a little bit later. And then compared to the U.S., Japan highly values respect, personal space, tradition, and group solidarity. So some background on Japan. Japan is the third largest economy in the world. It continues to grow and it grows every day. It's growing at high speeds just because it's got a huge population, but it is there's a ton of eyes on Japan in terms of when we're talking about technology and fashion specifically. A lot of that stuff starts in Japan. Japan is a bridge between the east part of the world and the west part of the world, and it just kind of brings everything together in terms of business. And so Japan kind of conducts, their business between the two and brings them together. Japan is a trendsetter. I think I kind of mentioned this a little bit ago, especially in terms of fashion. A ton of fashion shows appear in Japan, and that's how a lot of fashion designers promote their new lines and brands and get their product and name out there. A lot of them start in Japan just because Japan is highly known for fashion and starting trends along those lines. There are a ton of incentives when starting business in Japan, just because, like I've mentioned, there's a ton of eyes on Japan because it's constantly growing, and because of that, businesses boom. There's tons of opportunities for businesses to grow, for change, promotions, that kind of thing. And Japan is the backbone of the Japanese economy just because it's constantly growing and everything just seems to start there. Everything seems to be rooted in Japan itself. So for Japanese culture in general, Japan is the backbone of the economy. Some behaviors, like I mentioned, Japan highly values respect, personal space, tradition, and the group solidarity. Respect is probably the most valued behavior amongst the Japanese culture and business culture. We don't really see a lot of the respect that is seen over in Japan in the U.S., and with the lack of respect, the Japanese culture and business world aren't really willing to conduct business without that respect. So it's very important to remember the respect values of the business. They highly value their personal space. As you can see in the photo here, they've got that space in between them. It's more common in the U.S. to be a lot closer. You have your handshakes, you're kind of huddled closer together, standing close together. In Japan, that's not really a common thing, and they don't really like it. They kind of take offense to the closeness. They like the separation between everybody, so their personal space. And tradition. Tradition is a huge thing in Japan, not just in the business world, but just in general. They stick to tradition and what is known, what's what they've done in the past. They stick to it. It seems to have worked in the past, so they kind of continue on with that to make everything work now. Growth. There's a ton of business opportunities just because Japan is constantly growing. It's got a huge population, so when it comes to business, there's a ton of opportunities just because there's so many eyes on Japan, and just so many opportunities to just get the business out there, and products, all that kind of stuff, just get it well known. So Japan is known for its business opportunities. And then I've already touched on the technological advances in fashion. Again, that's where a lot of fashion and technology starts, and a lot of different countries try to copy the looks, how things work and perform, similar to what comes out in Japan. You see that a lot in the US, especially when we're talking about companies like Apple.
Negotiation makes up a large portion of Japanese business culture. They base who they want to do business with on who they like, trust, and long-term goals of their company. It's more than just facts and data. They negotiate in teams in order for you to meet as many people in the company as possible. But the first person you contacted will be present throughout the whole negotiation process. Decisions will be made through consensus with the group. Decisions will not be made at the first meeting or rarely at the second, because they must consult with the head office before any decisions can be made. Japanese businesses come into business partnerships with very strong opinions and with little authority to change them. But once they start to like you, their flexibility will become obvious. This is why respect and patience is so important when conducting business in Japan. Harmony is a guiding philosophy for Japanese culture because it balances society. Working in harmony is viewed as a crucial element for productivity, and they feel the need to be indirect, gentle, and courteous even if they disagree with you. This is how they preserve harmony. From a young age in Japanese culture, they are taught modesty, honor, and ultra-politeness, and this is due to living in a collectivistic culture. Individuals often perceive themselves as members of groups rather than individuals. These groups they belong to give them their identity, but also require high amounts of loyalty. These groups give their members a sense of belonging and unity. Professional participation is highly valued. They strive to achieve high excellence and perfection. They work to the point of utter exhaustion most of the time to contribute to society as a whole. This makes Japan one of the most sleep-deprived developed countries. In Japanese culture, they rely less on their words to convey context and more on posture, expression, and tone of voice. But they change their verbal and nonverbal cues based on who they are talking to. For example, when talking to a friend, it may come off as relaxed, but when talking to a respected elder, it may be more formal. This is due to the hierarchies in society based on age. Overall, Japanese language is formal and observant. They do whatever they can to avoid conflict. This helps maintain harmony, and disagreeing with others openly may threaten this. They are also motivated to keep relationships and groups they belong to. This all leads back to their collectivistic approach, where no one person is responsible for success or worthy of speaking for the whole group. Thank you.
I'll be going over business practices and protocols. First will be business presentation. Typically, a hard sell approach does not work in Japan, so instead, you should use a more gentle and persuasive approach to showcase your proposal. Since Japanese decision-making is often based on consensus, using deadlines and ultimatums can be seen as disrespectful. Your best strategy would be to find points of agreement and then build upon them. Next is business card etiquette. Business cards are seen as an extension of someone's identity. So whenever exchanging business cards, it's important to do so with both hands. Whenever you exchange business cards, you should place them in a business card holder and never in your pocket or your wallet. If it's given to you while seated, read through the card and then place it on the table in front of you for the duration of the meeting. Next is the importance of silence. If you're not called upon, silence is gold. It speaks of wisdom and emotional self-control. And in addition, silence is often used to avoid tension in meetings. Next is punctuality. It's important that you arrive at least 10 to 20 minutes before a meeting, and you should call at least an hour before the meeting to confirm your attendance. If you are ever unavoidably late, you should call at least 45 minutes in advance to notify of your tardiness. Next is personal conversation. Typically, Japanese people are reserved, so it's not wise to talk about your family, your belongings, your religion, politics, or even your children's achievements. That's because they'll probably not be comfortable talking about those topics. And you should never badmouth your competitors or anyone in their company because they highly value respect. Next is business outside the office. Japanese people like to take business outside of the office and into their homes. So if you're ever invited, take your shoes off and wear the slippers inside and then follow your host. Typically, there should be a separate pair of slippers to be used in the restroom. And next is dinner manners. When you're eating dinner, you should never use your chopsticks to pierce food. And if you ever need to leave the table, you should place the chopsticks in their holder and never in your plate or on your food. If you ever finish small dishes, you should replace the lids. If your cup is empty, expect your partner to fill it up. And if you do not want it to be filled, do not empty your cup. Likewise, you should always fill your partner's cup whenever it is empty. Next is business protocol. In Japan, people always greet each other with the bow. It's a great sign of respect. To do so, you should place your arms to your sides and then bow at least a 35-degree angle. And you should always greet in order of company rank. Next is business wear. Men are expected to wear dark-colored suits with a tie and a white shirt. Women are expected to dress conservatively in subdued colors. Jewelry should be at a minimum, and women should not use high heels. Next is gift giving. Gift giving plays an important part in Japanese culture. Whenever you're giving gifts, it can be something of significance from your home country. If it's just for your partner, anything office appropriate would be a good gift. You could give them an expensive pen or an expensive business card holder. If it's for the entire office, getting snacks from your home country that can be shared to the office is also appropriate. If you're ever giving a gift, avoid the color red and do not give gifts in sets of 4 or 9. Business relationships. Japanese people really like to establish trust with their partners before doing any business. So expect to be invited out for eating or drinking. In conclusion, Japan is an advanced country and is one of the largest world economies. It has very distinct business practices from the United States. They value modesty and humility, and it's important that you understand their collectivist culture.